Hurricane season is officially underway.
Pretty bad.
From spawning flash flooding, dangerous winds, and deadly tornadoes, hurricanes can be blamed for them all. Here in Alabama, we are accustomed to seeing these massive storms track across the southeast. Tonight, the WIAT 42 Storm Track Weather Team has everything you need to stay informed, so you can keep your family safe. Good evening, and thank you for joining us for the WIAT Storm Track Tropics Weather Special. I'm Chief Meteorologist Mark Prater.
And I'm meteorologist Ted McInerney. For the next 30 minutes, we'll share with you the science of hurricanes and tropical storms and how we track them to keep you informed.
Well, a big undertaking such as this requires our entire team. So along with myself and Ted, we also have meteorologist Ashley Gann and Nate Harrington here in the studio as well. We'll get back with them in just a moment. But first, let's take a look at what we've got planned for this evening.
Yeah, we'll take a look at the science behind hurricanes and tropical storms. We'll tell you the difference between the two, additional weather developments that come from these storms. We'll also discuss some of the most powerful hurricanes to affect the Gulf Coast. And we'll show you how we track these developments and get that information out to you.
When you look at a hurricane from a satellite perspective, it's a magnificent machine in the atmosphere. It's really beautiful. But once you get on the inside of these storms, that's where the turmoil is. We're looking at Hurricane Mitch, which was a mature hurricane with an eye. When we look at a storm system and we see an eye like that, that means the storm has matured. Everything is functioning properly. It has a good exhaust system with winds up on top of the storm, and that helps to continue to fuel the thunderstorms that are the entire storm. So it's made up of a multitude of thunderstorms as well as wind and even the storm surge. But it's systems like this that will affect us again in the Gulf of Mexico as well as the Atlantic Ocean. And once they make landfall, they may lose some of their edge, but they can still be a very powerful source of not only severe weather, but also life-changing weather for our area.
Tropical storms and hurricanes share some common characteristics, but are different, normally in size and shape, and impacts that threaten land. Tropical storms have winds of 39 to 74 miles per hour and are generally less organized than hurricanes. Tropical storms' greatest hazard, torrential rain that can cause inland flooding. Wind impacts are minor, but tropical storm force winds can knock down trees and power lines. Hurricanes have winds of 75 miles per hour or more, and some can pack winds of more than 155 miles per hour. A hurricane's greatest hazard, coastal storm surge and wind damage to not only trees and power lines, but buildings too. Storm surge flooding, however, is the most costly and deadly of a hurricane's impacts. And no matter what they're called, hurricane or tropical storm, both can have impacts here in central Alabama.
Once we have a hurricane, we break it down into categories. It's called the Saffir-Simpson scale. You can see this diagram of a home and some trees. You can start to see the winds picking up for a Cat 1, 74 miles an hour to 95 miles an hour. That provides some damage. And then as we get a little bit more wind, over 95 miles an hour, it becomes a Category 2 hurricane. The shingles are off the house, trees are swaying, limbs are down off of trees, and then as we get the roof starting to blow apart and damage to the home, it's a Cat 3, devastating damage up to 129 miles an hour, and then it gets real bad with a Category 4 hurricane. You start to see the house come apart, trees toppling 130 to 156 miles per hour, and then the beast of all storms is a Category 5 hurricane like Hurricane Andrew back in 1992. Homes are completely flattened, trees are flattened too.
The greatest threat to life and property in a hurricane is storm surge.
Storm surge is caused by the wind forcing water inland, and although the cause of surge is due to the wind, the impact surge has to the coast includes many factors, like the storm's intensity, the speed of the storm, and shape of the coastline. But the category of the storm does not always determine the potential damage. Take these storms, for example. Hurricane Charlie, a Category 4 storm, had the smallest surge at 6 to 8 feet, whereas Katrina, Category 3 at landfall, and Ike, a Category 2, both produce surge heights over 20 feet. The result of storm surge can include beach erosion, extreme flooding, damage to buildings, to completely wiping homes from their foundation.
And over the last 25 years, coastal population density has grown between 15 to 30%, making people more vulnerable to the dangers of storm surge. The best way to stay safe? Evacuate. when a storm is heading your way.
Thanks, Ashley. Coming up after the break, we'll take a look at some of the hurricanes to affect the state of Alabama over the years.
Also, hurricanes can stir up more than just wind and rain. We'll show you how they can cause other weather issues. And don't forget our weather updates of all types. Check out our Storm Track weather app. It's free and available on Android and Apple devices. Thanks for joining us for the WIAT 42 Storm Track Tropics special. We'll be right back.
While we've been very fortunate over the past several years to not have much in the way of hurricanes across the southeast of the Gulf of Mexico and affect us here directly in Alabama, we still can't let our guard down.
Yeah, Mark, case in point, let's take a look at this map behind us. This is all the hurricanes that have ever hit the Alabama coast. You can see, Mark, the map gets a little crazy. Some of these names are some very memorable names that thousands of Alabamians will never forget. Alabama's coast has been hit by countless tropical systems, but it's the big ones people remember. Hurricane Frederick smashed into the central Gulf Coast on September 12, 1979. Winds of 135 miles per hour were measured on Dolphin Island. Over a dozen tornadoes spun up, and heavy rain pounded West Alabama. Early radar and satellite images show the eye of the storm moving into Mississippi.
It took many years for a storm to match up to Frederick, until Hurricane Opal on October 4th, 1995. Opal came ashore on the Florida Panhandle and moved right up into central Alabama. Most of Opal's damage came from coastal storm surge, but the heavy rain caused flash flooding in Jefferson County. Birmingham police closed 20 streets due to high water. Winds were reported near 50 miles per hour at the Birmingham airport, over 80 miles per hour atop Red Mountain.
Nearly 10 years later, in 2004, Hurricane Ivan made landfall near Gulf Shores, Alabama on September 16th. Ivan had winds of 130 miles per hour and was a Category 3 hurricane. Those hurricane-force winds stayed with the storm as far north as Uniontown in Perry County. The center of Tropical Storm Ivan moved over the Birmingham metro, causing numerous areas to flood, tornadoes to spin up. It took years for the Gulf Coast to recover from the storm surge and wind damage. Ivan, Opal, and Frederick are names Alabamians will never forget.
And something to think about with Ivan, a powerful hurricane slamming right into Mobile, coming right through the heart of our area. This can happen, and it will again.
And the biggest thing is it landed in Gulf Shores, so to the east of the eye is where the most powerful storm surge is. And then once that gets inland, it causes a lot of flooding. And meteorologist Nate Harrington has a look at inland flooding effects.
Impacts of tropical weather aren't just confined to the coast. Flooding is a big problem as tropical storms or hurricanes move inland. In fact, flooding is the most dangerous hazard for people living away from the coast. Tropical storms and hurricanes can produce widespread torrential rains in excess of 6 inches, which may result in floods. Flash flooding can quickly occur due to intense rainfall, and longer-term flooding on rivers and streams can persist for several days after the storm is gone. When approaching water on a roadway, always remember, turn around, don't drown. Rainfall amounts are not directly related to the strength of a tropical storm or hurricane, but rather to the speed and size of the storm as well. And the geography of the area can play a part too. Slower moving and larger storms produce more rainfall, and areas of higher elevation can enhance rainfall from a tropical storm or hurricane. Now is the time to know if you live in an area that's prone to flooding and have a plan in place just in case a tropical storm or hurricane threatens you.
One thing that we always have to watch for with a hurricane or any tropical system are inland tornadoes. And a lot of times we get caught up on the wind speed for the Gulf Coast, the storm surge, but once that system moves on shore, that's where we start to see smaller spin-up tornadoes develop with this system. Again, remember, the hurricane is an entire complex of thunderstorms. With a counterclockwise motion, that's adding a lot of spin to the air. It's an area of low pressure, and that can allow for small spin-ups within the lines of thunderstorms, even the squall lines that are actually the feeder bands associated with this storm. We have seen tornadoes on all sides of a hurricane, but once we have a tornado pop up, the problem with detecting those is they are very short-lived. They spin up very quickly and they die off very quickly. So that's why once a system like this moves onshore and moves into the state of Alabama, our main focus is going to be the tornado threat, albeit not large tornadoes, but we could see a multitude of them, and they can be just as deadly.
There's much more to share with you after the break. WIAT 42 anchors Sherry Jackson and Jim Dunaway will join us to look at the country's most costliest hurricanes. Also, we'll revisit one Homewood family greatly affected by Hurricane Katrina 10 years ago. But I want you to do something right now. Download the new WIAT Storm Track weather app for live weather alerts, interactive radar, hour-by-hour forecasts, and it's free on Apple and Android devices. You're watching the WIAT 42 Storm Track Tropics Special, weather coverage you can count on.
Welcome back. Well, hurricanes do so much more than just bring heavy amounts of rain and record-setting winds to affected areas. The impact they cause can continue for years, even after much of the damage has already been cleaned up. WIAT 42 news anchors Sherry Jackson and Jim Dunaway join us here in the studio to explain.
It can take years to rebuild what a hurricane destroys in just moments. And sometimes the cost to rebuild can be monumental.
The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, keeps track of the amount of damage incurred by hurricanes. Some of the numbers you're about to see are staggering.
Each of the top 5 costliest hurricanes easily crossed the $1 billion mark. At number 5 is Hurricane Wilma. It cost $21 billion worth of damage when it struck South Florida in 2005. Hurricane Andrew is 4th. It's the only storm on the list to make landfall as a Category 5 hurricane. It struck the South Florida coast in 1992 and generated more than $26 billion in damage. Hurricane Ike ranks at number 3. Ike made landfall in Galveston, Texas in 2008 and was attributed to damages upwards of $29 billion. At number 2 is Hurricane Sandy. This 2012 hurricane impacted 24 states as it moved up the eastern seaboard and caused $50 billion worth of damage. Topping the list at number 1, Hurricane Katrina, with estimated damages of over $108 billion. This Category 5 storm dropped to a Category 3 when it made landfall in southern Louisiana in 2005. Katrina is to blame for more than 1,000 deaths across the Gulf Coast.
Nearly 10 years later, Katrina is still ranked as one of the costliest natural disasters and one of the 5 deadliest hurricanes in U.S. history.
While there have been many hurricanes that have hit the Gulf Coast, none stand out more than Hurricane Katrina. At one time, Katrina was a Category 5 hurricane in the central Gulf with 175-mile-an-hour sustained winds. It made landfall near Biloxi, Mississippi. Some cities like Gulfport and Biloxi had areas leveled by winds and storm surge.
The National Guard is in the area.
But it was the devastating effects it had on a major American city that shocked us all. The hurricane badly damaged New Orleans, but it was days later that the Lake Pontchartrain levee system began to fail. The city that sits below sea level was flooded for weeks. The pumps struggled to get the water out. People were stranded and many died. Thousands of people couldn't return home for months, and many chose to never return.
Many people who evacuated New Orleans during Katrina ended up here in Alabama.
FEMA reported that Hurricane Katrina led to the largest direct housing mission in Alabama history. People stayed in shelters and parks and campgrounds. Some of them stayed on cruise ships and interim housing, trailers. But many others came to be with people who could provide a little taste of home away from home, fleeing tragedy to be with family.
With 130-mile-an-hour winds and a nearly 28-foot wall of water, Katrina was no ordinary hurricane.
You remember the big eye of the storm building in the Gulf, and it looked like it was occupying the majority of the Gulf, coming straight for Louisiana.
Vic DiCarlo clearly remembers 2005 and how it showed that his is no ordinary family. During that monster storm, his Homewood household went from this to this in the immediate days before and after Hurricane Katrina.
Once they realized that the evacuation was going to be more than for 2 or 3 days, and things were, New Orleans was flooding, then it was everybody came here to be the central location.
And he means everyone.
We had anywhere from 2-year-old twins to 80-something-year-old grandparents, and everything in between.
The empty room and sofas you see right here today were filled with people on top of people when WIAT 42 News came to their home 10 years ago.
How many people are we talking about?
We ended up with my family, with the families here, we ended up with about 35, 36 people, including my own immediate family here. So we housed about 36 people.
There were the DeCarlos, the Clessis, the Peixotas.
Strong Italian family on my side, and even my friend that came up from Biloxi, strong Italian family. So Vicks and Vincents are common names. At one point, we had 6 people named Vincent in this house. So what, 1 out of 5 of us were named Vincent.
Among them, his father, Mr. Vincent, the senior-most Vincent in the house during that storm. Katrina impacted his health in a way that made this time they spent together that much more special. Mr. Vincent DeCarlo passed away in the last year.
My father, who used to work for the Orleans Levee Board, never evacuated in his life, never wanted to evacuate. And thank God my brother said, "No, Dad, you're coming with us."
Thankfully, he did. They all did, young and old, friends and family, finding a home away from their own homes in a hurricane of epic proportions. And in all this, the DeCarlos found out something extraordinary about their own neighbors. Then,
our neighbors and the churches and all of our friends in Homewood have been absolutely fantastic. And we haven't had to cook a meal. We have food coming in afternoon every evening, and it's been wonderful.
And now,
it would have almost been impossible to do it without the help, which is a humbling feeling. You've never needed help in your life. And I didn't evacuate from New Orleans. It wasn't me. It was for the extended family. And there's no way we could have done this without the support of friends and community.
That generosity in their time of need stuck with the New Orleans DeCarlos.
The return of that is that when the tornadoes came through Alabama, my relatives in New Orleans did the same thing and collected money there and brought it back here, that I distributed to some people in the nursery.
Giving to others what had been given to them.
Thank you so much, Jim and Sherry. WIAT Storm Track Tropics Special is back after the break. We'll show you how we use technology to track tropical storms and keep you informed so you can keep you and your family safe. You're watching WIAT 42 weather coverage you can count on.
A valuable resource for meteorologists during hurricane season are hurricane hunters.
Hurricane hunters fly through tropical storms and hurricanes to gather information like pressure, wind speed, and movement of storms. When entering a major storm, Category 3 or above, drop sondes are released to determine the maximum winds and lowest pressure at the surface. And by adding the data received from hurricane hunters to a forecast, it can make it up to 30% more accurate. And that increased accuracy also means better evacuation plans, which ultimately leads to more lives saved and reduced costs.
The hurricane hunters are part of the Air Force Reserve, stationed at Keesler Air Force Base in Biloxi, Mississippi, and have been flying into storms since 1944.
Thanks a lot, Ashley. Hurricane hunters, one of the best tools that we have to forecast tropical storms and hurricanes, but we've got so many other tools here in the Storm Track Weather Center. One, satellite, shows us the storms as they form way out in the open waters of the Atlantic or Gulf of Mexico. And we can tell how strong storms could be because of sea surface temperatures. We can plot that data. We can tell you that warmer temperatures usually equal stronger storms, and a data buoy network that shows wind speeds, water temperature, and lots of other information that get put into computer models. Computer models that can show us the track of a storm through spaghetti plots, appropriately named because it looks like a big bowl of spaghetti out there, but it shows the track of a storm. We can also show intensity forecasts through these models that show us how strong a tropical storm or hurricane might be. And with all these tools, you can count on the WIAT 42 Storm Track Weather Center to keep you informed when tropical weather threatens you.
We'd like to thank you for joining us for our Storm Track Tropics special. We hope we were able to help provide you and your family with details about tropical storm systems and how we track them, all in hopes of keeping you and your family informed.
Staying informed and educated is the best defense when it comes to severe weather. One easy way to do it is to download our Storm Track weather app. It's free, that's best of all. It's available on Apple and Android devices.
And I want to say thanks to everyone who's been a part of this, not only Darcel Hall, but also the best weather team I could possibly ask for. You can always get information and updates on your forecast, and that is at WIAT.com or also our weather app. We want to thank you so much for being with us tonight. We hope you enjoyed this program and it helped you and your family prepare for severe weather season and the tropics.